Hello there and welcome to the Fastmarkets Live Lounge, broadcasting to you live here from the Middle East Iron and Steel Conference in Dubai. And I'm delighted to say that joining us here today is a very special guest. Dr. Ruchi Dana is a partner and also an executive board member at Dana Group with a very impressive career spanning many different industries. Ruchi's made a substantial impact not only at Dana Group but also in the fields of entrepreneurship, medical technology and venture capital. Recognised as one of Forbes Middle East's top power businesswomen in 2020 and a 3-time honoree as Next Generation Business Leader in the Arab world, Ruchi is a powerhouse of innovation, leadership and influence. Of course, Dana Group is a very diversified conglomerate that has made its name as a global benchmark in the steel industry. It's known for its commitment to quality, reliability and technological advancement. Today, we are looking forward to exploring Ruchi's journey, her insights on leadership and innovation, and her thoughts of the role of women in global business. Ruchi, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure.
It's really good to have you with us. And I'm really interested in your career. It's spanned multiple industries. You know, you've had all sorts of different leadership roles across lots of different sectors. I wonder if you could share a few sort of key moments from the early days, you know what really sort of shaped your outlook and also your future career.
Sure. I think that's a very important question, and it's very close to my heart as well. I remember when I was a kid growing up in Libya, I was born and raised in Libya, I used to play with toys, and instead of just playing with toys, I used to break them up and then remove the motors from the cars and use those motors to build boats and ships and use them over water and all. So I think it always was about innovation and inventions, and I really wanted to do something in that field. I remember I wanted to become a research scientist. And then when I went to medical college, again, I was working on low-cost medical devices. I was thinking about like how to innovate further, how to commercialize these devices. But even the best of professors in medical college back in those days, 2008, like the startup culture was not there. So like even the best of professors didn't really understand the language of business. They would publish papers, present papers, but didn't know or understand anything about commercializing companies or building businesses. So I think that's when I decided to go for an MBA, and eventually I got accepted to Stanford. I think that was a key decision in terms of innovating, and I'm proud to say I do have a couple of US patents granted in my name as well. So I think that was amazing. Like that was one of the key milestones, getting accepted to Stanford and then getting these US patents. I think that was really key to help me understand, like, okay, I couldn't become a research scientist, but I actually worked towards that goal and was able to do my best in terms of innovation and learn from the best of professors there at Stanford.
I think every parent hopes that their children might be able to go to Stanford. I know that I wish that for my 2 boys. What was the experience like for you, and how did it end up influencing your approach to leadership?
Sure, I think the experience there was amazing. When I went to Stanford, initially I was getting a little bit overwhelmed because there were like so smart people out there. Like all the students were engineers. I went in as a doctor, and I think I remember very well. I cut short a Hawaii trip with my friends just to make sure that I was able to do the homework and all. But that was just in the first year. Eventually, I was able to understand that people really don't really care so much about grades, and it's all about like working together in teams and groups, and there are people out there to help you all the time. So the culture there at Stanford was more collaborative, and I think that's how my leadership style also changed quite a lot. Like it's all about collaboration, getting the buy-in from people, and then eventually work towards a common goal. One of the courses that I remember very vividly at Stanford was the Biodesign Exchange program. So it has like engineers, lawyers, PhD students, medical students, doctors, lawyers, everybody comes together and solve for unmet clinical needs. And you think about crazy ideas to solve like a common problem. So, for example, as a doctor, you would never imagine a life without a stethoscope. That's the only way to measure a heartbeat. But when you are in a room full of doctors, lawyers, PhD students, engineers who are really smart, and you're asked to come up with a solution without a stethoscope, you think about crazy ideas. And there's a prototype lab there called the D School, in which you have like aluminium foil and various prototyping material, and you have to think about like don't think about any restrictions, any constraints, but just let your mind flow and think about solutions for clinical unmet needs. I think that was really critical to understand like the problem solving abilities at Stanford. And I remember very well one of my professors used to say that fast horses run faster with faster horses. So it's all about like getting into that community and working towards a common goal and solving like problems as a group. So I think that's where like I got really relaxed, and that was one course that really helped me understand that it's all about teamwork and it's all about leadership and getting forward with the group as a whole.
I love the idea of a group of basically geniuses all getting together with some silver foil and coming up with amazing inventions to solve the world's problems. I mean, aside from your time at Stanford, which was clearly really inspirational for you, what are the other sources of inspiration in your life? Are there particular people, for example, who've acted as mentors for you?
So when I was growing up, I saw both of my parents were doctors, and I really looked up to them as role models, and that's the reason I became a doctor. But eventually my father switched to business, and that was in the early 90s. And I saw the amount of hard work that he had to put in after leaving his profession and starting something on his own. I think the entrepreneurial journey really left a very big mark on me, and I was really inspired by all the hard work that he was doing. So he's one of my biggest role models, and he has helped me and pushed me and encouraged me to move forward and go forward with a big smile. Another role model that was difficult to find, especially in the steel industry, was Cecilia Danelli. So I once came across a Time magazine article, and it was an article from 1986 in which the article was titled "Italy's Iron Lady." So I think that's when I realized that it's possible for women to be in the steel industry, and I think we were missing those role models. But nowadays you see more and more women entering the steel industry, and I think that's something that I'm working towards on my own as well. And I mentor quite a lot of females to enter the steel industry because initially I lacked role models, but I think we have to change that for the going future.
You've actually been very involved with initiatives like Golden Seeds, which is of course a female-focused angel network, and also with Global Women in VC. Can you speak to the importance of empowering women for you, as a sort of personal belief within, business and also venture capital? And maybe you might have some success stories to share of women that you've, worked with and brought forward.
Sure. I remember very vividly, at Golden Seeds, we used to invest into women-owned companies, and many of those performed very, very well compared to male-dominated companies. And I think the culture is now changing quite a lot, and we need to focus more on women-focused companies. And one of the statistics that we closely monitor is the amount of wealth that's there with women. So around 1/3 of the world's wealth is held with women. But they rarely invest into any avenues. But it's really important to have financial independence and even the ability to invest into having something like a passive income stream on the side. It could be startups, VC, or any public equities or anything like that. But it's important to invest into the community. And I've seen women tend to focus a lot more on women-focused startups and invest into that community. And I think that's the only way to bring women forward. If you keep innovating and thriving on that community, if you keep investing into women-owned startups, it will go on further and further. And I think, to give you one example, there was a company on which I was on the board, and there were two co-founders, and the company was doing really well, and we were really happy about the company. The co-founders had worked together from school to college, and now started this company, and it was doing amazingly well. One day, finally, one of the co-founders said that we're about to split, and I cannot work with this other co-founder anymore. And we were all really shocked. How is it even possible? And that's since I was on the board, I actually met both the co-founders separately and tried to understand the problem. I think opening this line of communication is really key, and I think it's women on the board who are able to do this, because if it was a man, he would eventually think about what to do with the company, how to liquidate the company or the assets and all. But it's just because of women on the board, we were able to talk to the co-founders separately, and I understood the main problem with the co-founders was that one of the co-founders was given the task of operations, and the other co-founder was doing the fundraising. And the person who was doing operations thought that he was doing a very dirty task, and the person who was doing the fundraising has a very fancy job, and he can go all suited, booted, and go to investors and go to banks and all of this.
Go to the dinners.
Exactly,
yes.
Yeah. While the person who was fundraising thought that the operations is so easy, fundraising is real difficult. You have to go around obviously almost begging for money, and he had that mindset, and he thought operations was a much more easier task. So I think it was just about like communication and the lack of communication. You always see like the grass is greener on the other side. So having this meeting separately with both the co-founders made us understand that it's not that. It's just like a line of communication that was lacking, and helped solve the problem at all. Like we said that why don't you guys switch their roles, and they did that, and they found out that they were better at their previous roles.
Ah, that's interesting. But
Yeah.
it was that collaboration, it was that those lines of communication that was
Yeah.
so key. And yes, and it's interesting that might be seen as a more women-focused
Yes.
skill, but so valuable as a consequence.
Yeah.
So beyond the work that you do with these women-focused networks, what are some of the other ways that the business community, that the metals and steel community could actually introduce to encourage more women to go into leadership roles?
Yeah, sure. I think there's events like these, the Women in Steel conference, the roundtables that Fastmarkets is hosting tonight. I think those are some of the avenues to help get more women involved in the steel industry, because it's really difficult to recruit women and even retain women in the steel industry. So it's critical. To give you one example, like if you go around to buy a car or a washing machine or a microwave or anything, it's the woman of the house that makes the decision, and these are all products made out of steel, right? So you need to have that representation back at the board level as well. Like you need to have more women on board, and I think that's really critical, because only once you have women on board, they'll be able to influence the decisions for the retail buyers out there. So I think like it's really important to have more women in leadership positions, and you have to start from the grassroots level. You have to come up with programs to encourage internships, and on the factory floor, lean implementation programs, and I think like programs like this for the leadership community of women as well.
Staying on the topic of leadership, do you think that you have a leadership style? And is it something that you have worked on? Is it something that you've considered?
Sure, I would say it's more about leadership by example, and the way that I understand it is that instead of saying anybody to do something, why don't you do the task first and understand the depth of the task? So I remember very well when I joined the family businesses back in 2008. I initially wanted to start my own division, and my dad said, "Okay, go ahead, start your own division." So, how to start a division? The first step would be to design catalogs, to cold call clients. I remember I used to design catalogs, get the catalogs published, and eventually cold call the procurement department of all the oil and gas teams, and eventually get meetings, finally get vendor approvals, and finally get some orders. And once I got the orders, I realized that it's really key to get the execution of those orders done as well. So I remember I got an order. It was a very important order, and there was like a penalty on delayed deliveries and all of that. So I had to wear my safety shoes, hard hat, and go to the factory floor. I remember there was no metro back then. I didn't have a driving license. I used to take the bus to the factory and stay there in the factory all day and just observe what are the people doing and how much production can be done. I think just observing the factory floor workers, it gives them a lot of encouragement, and it helps you understand like what are the bottlenecks and how can you solve them. So then I took a course on lean implementation, and I really understood the basics of that. And I think it was that leadership by example that made the workers really empowered, and we came up with lean initiative of the month, and we had the workers empowered by asking that this is your machine, you take ownership of the machine, you make sure that it's clean and ready in the morning, so that once you're fresh in the morning you start the production. And they came up with amazing ideas, like instead of having a hand lever, they came up with an idea of having a foot lever to make the production much faster. And I think it's just empowering the people on their own, and making them understand that you're working towards a common goal. That's the style of leadership that I believe in now.
With so much experience spanning so many different networks, you must know a huge number of people in all sorts of different industries. And I know that is often seen as a key to someone's success. I mean, we all like to be on LinkedIn now, and everyone is, networking and communicating right now. And in fact, events like this are exactly designed for that. How would you advise people should go about forming those types of connections? What's the best way to build a network?
Sure. I think I do meet a lot of people, and I'm definitely not doing the best job of networking, because I do meet people and then I try to lose the connections, and I don't have a proper mechanism of maintaining that contact. And I think I've worked on it multiple times. I tried to use multiple apps, Notion, Todoist, and all of these things, but Eventually what I decided was that it's more about like the key people that you meet and how authentic that relationship begins. Like instead of expanding in a network wide, it's all about depth of the network. And once you find a person that you really want to connect to, it's all about like connecting with him or her on a deeper level. And that's where the authentic relationship comes. So you remember the birthdays, you send them messages on their birthdays, you get that reciprocity, and then you meet up them for coffee. Not just events, like you just don't meet them yearly once,
Yeah.
but continue that follow up throughout the year. And I think that's really key for the next generation of leaders that would be there. I would say like it's all about building authentic leadership. That's much more important than like having a very wide network, but you don't know whom to call to at the end of the day.
That's really interesting to hear that, because I think a lot of people believe the opposite. And so it's really interesting to hear from a leader such as yourself that one of the best ways is to have those deep connections. Now, innovation has clearly been a driving force in your career, as well as learning. You talked about learning a lot, which I find very interesting. What are some of the best techniques that you found for fostering innovation in the various different companies and industries you've worked in?
Yeah. I think innovation was really key, and back when I didn't have my MBA at Stanford, the factory was really like just happening. Like orders used to come, then we used to struggle for execution of those orders. But I think the entire mindset changed when we actually worked on empowering the workers and the team. And to have the innovation foster, we came up with like every weekly we have a round table in which we decide about what's the problem that we are facing, what's the bottleneck that you faced. We have a sheet in which we see like which orders are getting delayed and what's the reason for that. So there must be like some sort of bottleneck at every step. And once we find that bottleneck, and it might be a bottleneck that's not solvable on the factory floor. So once it comes to the office, you understand this is the bottleneck, and then the entire like team works together to solve that problem, and then think about crazy ideas to solve, similar to what I learned at Stanford and the design thinking method. So once you think about like crazy ideas, okay, what if we shift the factory or we shift the direction of this machine? And it's only when you think about such broad ideas that's when you're able to implement them and execute on them. So I think it's really key to have the entire buy-in of the team together. And once you have a problem, don't work on it on your own, but have the team work on it together. And then eventually, like the best of ideas could come from the grassroots level workers, because those are the ones who are actually working on the machines.
You've talked a lot about collaboration. You're a key member of a family business. What's it like working with your brothers, your father? What's it like working, as a family in a business?
Yeah, I think we've seen this from the very beginning. But I really miss those days when my dad was a doctor and my mom was a doctor, and they were like just working professionals, and we had the evenings to ourselves. We actually never had the evenings to ourselves because they used to be doctors on calls as well at times. But still, like whenever they were off duty, it was a very relaxed time. But I remember that my dad still used to like read quite a lot. He used to read those Times magazine, Newsweek, and all of those things, and that's where the curiosity came. But eventually, when my dad started the family business, initially it was very, very difficult for both me and my brother, because we were very proud of our parents being doctors. We would like proudly say to our classmates, schoolmates that, oh, my dad is a head of department of general surgery at this hospital and this and that. But eventually when he joined the business, he started the business on his own, we really didn't know what to say, because medicine is considered a very noble profession, while business is something that at that time we didn't really know what business is, what should we say, what does our dad do, and all of that. Those questions came in. But I think it was just about a little bit of weaning period for around 5 years, I would say. And then eventually, like once my brother joined the business, and then eventually the question came up to me as well, I joined the business, we understood that there's something that gets you involved day in and day out. And it's the entire family atmosphere that has changed completely, because all we think about is the business. And I think it's a healthy collaboration, because we have like joint lunches on every Sunday. It used to be Fridays, now it's Sundays. And like their kids, my brother's kids, and our parents together. And we think about like various things of expansion for the business, and at the same time taking care of the kids, showing them the factories and all. I think that's really helpful. And it's not just like, I know there's not much of a boundary, but it's at this point it's more about like strategic thinking, not day-to-day operations. So I think it's become a very, very healthy practice.
That's amazing. That sounds really sort of satisfying,
Yeah.
rather than, And I think some families find it hard to find what to talk about, especially in multi-generational situations, whereas you guys are always going to have something to talk about. You'll be the next stage of the business.
Yeah.
Now, our conference theme this year is Transform Tomorrow Together. And we are asking this of all of our guests, because as we look to the future of the industry, what does that theme mean to you personally? And how do you sort of see it shaping the future of Dana Group and the rest of your industry?
Yeah. So if we talk about tomorrow, I think like clear themes would be sustainability and innovation. And we are obviously working on both of them. We have 1.2 megawatt of solar installed on the factory rooftop, and we have environment product declaration. And so that's on the sustainability part. And we're also working with a couple of consultants on working more on like diversity and inclusion and having those policies set, because it's we are not really there yet. And I think it's the need for the future, and it's important to just have a roadmap as of now and work towards it later on. And in terms of innovation, I think we have done quite a lot. We recently had the SIRI assessment, the Smart Industry Readiness Index. It was done by Siemens. Then we had the ITTI Index assessment, that Industrial Transformational Technology Assessment. And I think that was by MOIAT, Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology. They have taken lead in this. Then we had the energy audit by Schneider Electric. So these were all factory audits in which like I was personally involved, and it was really amazing to see like what's the future of the industry. It's like steel used to be considered as a very, very traditional industry, but it's evolving quite a lot. There are a lot of talks about green steel, innovation, and even supply chain disruption. So we actively invest into startups that are working on towards like these themes, and that could be aligned to the family business as well. So I think if we talk about transforming tomorrow, it's more about innovation and sustainability, and we are working on both of those together. But innovation is a little bit ahead compared to sustainability at this moment, but we would like to improve on the sustainability practices as well.
Really exciting to hear there about, the future being bright for you at Dana Group. Thank you so much. What a really fascinating interview. We've really appreciated your time. Thank you.
You so much. I think it was really amazing. You asked some very intelligent and very empathetic questions. I'm really impressed, and I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, and I'm sure our listeners around the Live Lounge and people listening later as well have really, really enjoyed your insights, particularly on leadership. I found it very, very interesting indeed. And of course, if you want to hear more interviews like this, make sure you subscribe to the Live Lounge, and then you can find all of our episodes on Apple, we're on Amazon, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our events in the steel industry, do visit the Metals event section on fastmarkets.com.